Welcome back to the show, everybody. We're getting closer. We're about to listen to some information and look at some information that I believe, the culmination of everything coming together here really is taking us to an amazing place with XRP and the ledger. We're going to listen to Brad Garlinghouse tell us that central banks are considering launching stablecoins off of the XRP ledger. We're also going to look at some other news that is really, really important, the way it lays out before we get to that moment, to really show you that this is not just statements from Brad Garlinghouse, that this is an absolute international effort that's being taken place around the world. Let's get started. Roll that beautiful intro.
This is Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Subscribe for new content notifications. Now, here's Brad Kimes. Come on in.
All right, welcome back to the show. So let's go ahead and get into this thing. We're going to start with just a soft piece of news that leads us into where we're going here today. The Bank of International Settlements central banks responded decisively and effectively to contain the pandemic shock, but monetary policy cannot fix everything forever. This is Augustin Carstens who is giving that comment here. We know that the BIS has a innovation hub specifically designed to work on fintech and digital payments for the central banking system. We know that the Federal Reserve out of New York, as well as many other central banks, are participating in that innovation hub. Now, I showed you a while back here, and I'm going to bring it up again because it needs to set the tone of where we're going. This is a PDF from the G20 on digital currencies and stable coins. Now, if I scroll down here, and I'm just going to get us very quickly to the page, it is right here. We went over this, but this needs to be highlighted again. This was from Mark Carney in 2019 at his time at the Bank of England. He talked about the problem with the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency, and what he talked about was whether or not we should be using a systemic hegemonic currency because it could dampen the spillover shocks associated with the dominance of the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. A systemic hegemonic currency could, for example, be a stable coin backed by a basket of deposits at different central banks. It is possible that such a stable coin could be valuable for cross-border payments, serving a function similar to that offered in the private sector by Ripple, a real-time gross settlement system, currency exchange, and remittance network whose digital currency XRP leapfrogs slow and expensive correspondent banking. Now, to go along with that, some time ago when I did cover this, I did a diagram of Mark Carney's definition of what would happen. And if you look at this triangle in the middle to just represent as a whole major banks, central banks, just, let's just assume that that is the representation of that, just the image itself. What he's talking about is the idea that you would take a percentage of your nostro vostro, your pre-funded money, dormant capital, and you would fund a basket of deposits that are held at different central banks around the world. This, by default, could collateralize the XRP ledger and the XRP token to what we would call a floor price or a price set, allowing XRP to have the value for the world to begin to use it as a bridge currency to exchange and settle all the transactions of all the money. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward in the head, but we're not done yet because we're going to keep building the case. Then we went on to talk about the fact that we were following the FSB, the Financial Stability Board, which is a regulatory agency connected to the G20. It is usually a collective of many different people from around the world from the G20 represented countries. So we're about to hear some comments from Brent McIntosh, which I played for you yesterday, plus some extra comments that he made. And Brent McIntosh apparently works at the U.S. Treasury, is a lawyer himself, obviously, and works on the FSB with the worldwide panel there on getting it right when it comes to regulating and supervising oversight for global stablecoin arrangements. In the clip that I'm going to play you, Brent McIntosh is talking about in this clip the idea, working with the FSB, that some stablecoin could graduate to mass adoption throughout the world. I want you to listen to his comments here. This is remarkable. And then we're going to go down a few other pieces of information, and then we're going to hear what Brad Garlinghouse says. You're not going to believe it. This is Brent McIntosh. Let's start it right here, and I will pop in just a second. Here we go.
When we look at the rise of these technologies and the evolution of these technologies from the standpoint of the U.S. regulatory community and even the international regulatory community, we see a series of age-old imperatives that, although the technology is evolving, the imperatives apply just the same here. Those are things like things that Brian mentioned, money laundering and illicit finance, ensuring that this is not a sort of digital free-for-all for behaviors that we in the United States have spent a great deal of time stamping out and working to stamp out. That's ensuring that there is user protections built in here. So, for example, we're thinking about questions like the reserve that backs a stablecoin.
The reserve that backs a stablecoin. You mean just like what's suggested here by Mark Carney? Like this image right here? Deposits held in different central banks around the world? Let's keep going. Let's go back into the video here.
And the composition of that reserve and the reserve requirements. Similarly, the Financial Stability Board, which is an international body that grew out of the global financial crisis, has been looking at the potential financial stability consequences of most recently, of a stablecoin that were adopted at scale and used around the world and became a sort of international currency. There are concerns as well around data privacy here.
He just said about a stablecoin that would be adopted around the world. A global stablecoin. That's what he's talking about there, right? A stablecoin, a global stablecoin, is a stablecoin with the potential reach and adoption across multiple jurisdictions and the potential to achieve substantial volume. Let's get back to his comments here.
And operational resilience and cybersecurity that are clearly present here in a way that they're not present with current Fed reserves or cash. And so those are questions that need to be resolved in a meaningful way to ensure the success of these systems. And then obviously, I would be remiss as a Treasury Department official unless I pointed out that we want to collect taxes. This should not be a tax-free zone. So whatever level of taxation you believe is appropriate, it's not a tax-free zone just because you stick cyber or crypto in front of the currency name.
In other words, the government gonna get theirs. You can count on that. However, but it says in front of the currency name. They are looking at these assets, these cryptocurrencies, as currency. Why is that? Because it's the safest path with the least resistance. Because the world is already well connected when it comes to how to regulate from the banking sector, the government sector, to the consumer sector. We all know what currency is. Doesn't matter what country you're in. We know what currency is, and everybody and every country around the world knows how to handle and deal, regulate, and legislate and supervise currency, because we all are intertwined when it comes to exchange of money. Now we're just moving to a digital form. So it's really about using the things that are already there to oversee these digital assets in the form of money. And the reason I say that is because I also lean heavily into the analogies that we hear Brian Brooks talk about from the OCC. The FCC didn't make cell phones. They just adjusted the framework of their policy and regulations to make sure that they encompass the private sector as they developed cell phones. That's what's key here. Let's keep going.
And so governments have rules to address these sorts of concerns in the existing system, and they need to think thoughtfully and quickly about how to apply those rules in the cyber domain and how to apply them with regard to these new and evolving technologies, whether it be the cryptocurrencies that were and remain very prominent, the possibility of a stablecoin that we were adopted at scale, or a central bank digital currency.
I mean, these are massive comments that he's making here, and he's acknowledging that we already have the framework in place to deal with these things. In my mind, when I hear him say these things, I'm hearing him reference the fact that we're talking about monetary policy. We're talking about regulating currencies. Is there any more regulated entities than the banking sector? Are you kidding me?
So the Financial Stability Board has done a good deal of work looking at, and I worked on this work, looking at how we should apply those sorts of principles to evolving technologies, and how to take a situation where a new technology is accomplishing the same business as a prior technology, whether it be cash or some other commercial bank money, and poses the same risks. It should comply with the same rules. And how exactly to make that work in a rapidly evolving technology set is something that regulators around the world are working on intently. And then there's obviously, from the perspective, we don't have the Fed here today, but there's obviously a question for central banks about the role of private currencies in monetary policy and monetary sovereignty, and their ability to continue to use monetary policy as a tool of economic growth and financial stability in a situation where, for example, there were cross-border adoption of a particular private or central bank issued digital currency. We in the United States have an obvious interest in monetary sovereignty and the role of the dollar. And so when we think about that, we
talk about monetary policy and the sovereignty of a nation and its money. That's what he's talking about right now. And then in walks Judy Shelton in the gold-backed system. You put XRP between everybody's money as a bridge currency between all the money, as Ripple says. And then you go to as Judy Shelton likes to say, a 5-year gold-backed bond system that's physically redeemable by gold matched to any fiat. Certainly the major currencies of the world. And now you have done two things. You have leaned into the globalist idea and agenda of using something like XRP, but not as a one world currency, as the globalists and hardliners in the globalist side of thought lean into. But you lean into the idea that it's split. It's the globalist notion of using a bridge currency instead, but then complementing that with the nationalist approach and train of thought and agenda and mindset of people, where you can maintain your sovereign nation and your money because it's good for you and it's good for your citizens, it's good for your country, and you can exchange that through a bridge currency like XRP, and you don't have the dirty work of having to deal with, oh, well, if we adopt XRP as money, then we lose our sovereign rights as a nation because this entity or these particular entities hold more of it than we do. No, that isn't where we're going. That isn't what's going to happen, and he's telling you that right here. And by the way, I don't mind telling you, I also believe that what the work is being done with the FSB obviously is leaning heavily in how I start to see the picture fit of how Judy Shelton gets full floor vote voted through on the Senate and then works her magic when it comes to introducing a gold-backed system to CBDCs and the digital currency and digital dollar and being able to support this system moving forward, which would be the new financial system of the world. All right, let's listen to just a few more comments here from him, and then we'll move on.
There are obvious questions for the Fed to address with regard to these technologies. I'll just turn for a moment to central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, which I think there's some it's not always clear what exactly we're talking about there. And with regard to central bank digital currencies, we're talking about a sort of third form of central bank money. It's not cash. It's not the sort of bank reserves held at the Fed that are the other form of central bank digital currency. It's in the forms being talked about now, we're talking about actually consumer used central bank money, whether it be tokenized or account based. And a number of central banks, as Brian pointed out, are studying this. The Bank for International Settlements recently put out a principles paper, which was done in conjunction with the Fed and the European Central Bank and the Bank of England and several other central banks to think through the public policy questions that arise out of a central bank digital currency. These are public policy questions that are not just questions for central banks. They're really questions for the governments and the people of various countries to think through. Because as Brian points out, a central bank digital currency does provide the central bank and thus the government a great deal of power. It provides a great deal of insight into all the transactions that are happening, awareness of those transactions, potentially the ability to control those transactions or stop those transactions. And that power could be used in some instances for good, but it could certainly be used for malign purposes. And I think that when we look at the rise of central bank digital currencies in some non-market economies, the possibility of using those for malign purposes is very real. And then there's, of course, questions about if a central bank is issuing a digital currency, whether that causes disintermediation in the financial system and bank disintermediation, and the question of whether then there's a harm to the provision of private credit in the system.
And really quickly, when he was talking about the idea of, the government would have full control to be able to basically shut your money off. If it's digital, we can shut your money off. We can stop a transaction. And is that too much control for a government? You better believe it is. Now you start to get the weight of why Brian Brooks talks about the idea of a public-private relationship. Because if the FCC were to make those cell phones for us, which thank God they don't, but if they were to make those cell phones for us, they would decide what features we have, and they'd decide whether you have your phone turned on or turned off. So very key approach from the U.S. talking about a public-private relationship when it comes to these technologies. Very, very important. Let's keep going. Just a few more seconds here.
And these are hard questions that we need to work through as we consider the possibility of a central bank digital currency. There was a very interesting discussion this week among Chairman Powell, Madame Lagarde, and Andrew Bailey, who's the governor of the Bank of England, about these topics. And the position they all took was that these are not replacements for cash. They're intended to be done in a way that doesn't preempt cash or other digital currencies if they issue a central bank digital currency. Chair Powell said he's, quote, committed to carefully evaluating the benefits of a CBDC. And it's a question we'll approach with great care. And the main focus for him is on whether the CBDC would improve a dynamic and stable payment system. Christine Lagarde pointed out that there are real questions of monetary sovereignty. And one of the reasons the EU would want to adopt a central bank digital currency is autonomy for the euro area. And I think.
And there we go. And that's the large part I wanted you to hear there. For the ECB overseeing 17 or 19 countries now as a central bank for all of those countries over in Europe, would like to see the control of the euro to where they have the oversight over all of that money in that particular region, and that sovereignty really is under their control with the ECB. Not such a good idea when you're here from the States. So not liking that angle so much. So, but this is why I like the idea of a public-private relationship when it comes to stablecoins. This is why I like the idea of a public-private relationship when it comes to the idea of whether you're going to launch your CBDC or a digital dollar from the Fed or whatever. I believe you're going to make the best way and the best headway by joining with that public-private relationship, putting a little bit of a firewall between us and the government and how they can cut the money off. Okay, so a couple places we got to go here. Let's keep this thing moving because it really does, it escalates quickly. So this is from yesterday. This was Brian Brooks and obviously Brent McIntosh and Hester Peirce, who was there, and Paul Atkins. And it was a really great conversation from the Federalist Society. So I really thank all of them for actually, sharing all of that with us. So, okay. Now, this is a clip of Nick Bogelis from a Ripple Drop. Shout out to Nick Bogelis. And I really, really like seeing this guy in this light. Okay. It has not been the best back and forth, watching him go back and forth on Twitter. And crypto Twitter in general can be a cesspool, but I want to shout out Nick Bogelis for him shedding light in this Ripple Drop. I mean, it's pretty fantastic. Let me grab just a quick comment out of this and we'll keep moving, because they wanted to acknowledge some things about the ledger. Let's go ahead and listen right now.
Like development on the ledger. What stands out to you? What makes the XRP Ledger such a good platform for devs?
I think there are several advantages to the XRP Ledger as a platform. First of all, it's fast. You can quickly iterate on it and you can quickly test your code. Transactions take 3.5-4 seconds. It's also significantly cheaper, right? Transactions cost fractions of a penny. And I think we also support a rich set of underlying primitives. We have things like time locks, escrows, checks.
I'm sorry, what do you say? Time locks and escrows. Time locks and escrows. Don't you like that? Yeah, because they've had it for a long time, right? And when they pre-allocate a certain amount of XRP to someone, they don't just give it to them so they could dump it on the market. There's time locks and contractual agreements on this money, on this XRP that you are going to get, or whatever it is, whatever you paid for it at the time, whatever it is, you're just not going to get it and turn around and do whatever you want. Right? It's contractually obligated that you live up to your end. And I'm sure in most part, it's going to be get your legacy systems to where they can plug into the new market infrastructure. And on Ripple side of the contract, I'm sure that they're saying we are going to build the market infrastructure and have that place built for you to plug into, which is the ledger. Right? So pretty remarkable comments there. And then he goes on to talk about DeFi, which is really the new hot term. But DeFi has been around forever on the ledger since 2012. And interestingly enough, I remember a 2014 comment from Chris Larson saying that they could have Bitcoin on the ledger back in 2014. I have made many, many comments that I believe at some point we see a structural change happen in the way that they approach cryptocurrencies as a whole, as an industry. And proof of work coins, I believe, are going to catch a lot of heat. And I believe that is in large part because of the energy consumption. Now, right for the moment, I'm going to overlook the dominance that China controls Bitcoin and Ethereum, because the majority of the large miners are there. And that is not even disputable. It's just a fact. So I think at the end of the day, if we come back to the energy consumption, that carbon footprint is too big. It's too big for proof of work. And I think you're going to, I don't know, I'm out on a limb. This is my speculation here, but I think you end up seeing possibly cap gains for the miners that mine the Bitcoin, and then all pre-mined Bitcoin from that point is placed on the XRP ledger to go to work. And you get the same consistency in settlement time across the board throughout the whole industry and the whole space. And what's better than that, right? Then you have Bitcoin getting the advantage of being pre-mined, put on the ledger, and getting a 3 to 4 second settlement time. And that may escalate Bitcoin back into another conversation outside of just the conversation now of being a store of value. But I digress. Let's keep moving. This is from probably a year or two ago, but shout out to Bank XRP. So glad that he's back. U.S. Treasury have a meeting with Brad Garlinghouse, Ripple CEO. It was on October 3rd at the time. And again, I believe this was 2018 when it happened, but this was with the U.S. Treasury and the Secretary Mnuchin. And it's right here, meeting with Brad Garlinghouse, Ripple CEO. Now, this has been going on for years. This level of connection with Ripple and XRP to governments around the world, including the United States. I just wanted to point that out, that's been going on for a long time. Now, here this is from Frank Chaparro, and excuse me if I've said it wrong, Frank, but I really appreciate you doing this interview and getting this out of Brad. This is pretty remarkable. Listen to what Brad Garlinghouse says in this exchange. We do know of central banks looking at the XRP Ledger open source technology to issue stablecoins on the XRP Ledger. Brad Garlinghouse said this 2 days ago.
I mean, certainly we do know of central banks looking at the XRP Ledger as open source technology to issue stablecoins using the XRP Ledger. And that may happen, and frankly, it's open source technology. We don't even necessarily have to be involved with that now.
And I'll tell you something, that reminds me of this image right here. Let me go ahead and throw it up again. Central banks around the world could get onto the ledger. They don't even have to contact Ripple. It's open source technology. Just do it. Just like Nike. Boom. We just do it. And there it is. And this is the definition here, according to Mark Carney, when his time at Bank of England. Let's go ahead and go back to the rest of the comment here.
The XRP Ledger as open source technology to issue stablecoins using the XRP Ledger. And that may happen, and frankly, it's open source technology. We don't even necessarily have to be involved with that. Now, as experts in using the XRP Ledger, some of them talk to us, and we try to be helpful, and we think that can be good for the overall dynamics in the XRP community. Now,
so we do know of central banks looking at the XRP Ledger open source technology to issue stablecoins on the XRP Ledger. Shout out to Mickey B. Fresh for that clip right there, and everybody else who sent clips in today. I appreciate each and every one of you. I want to remind people now that this is an international conversation. I know domestically here in the States, it's been a pretty heated topic to watch regulations and all the different agencies who can't make up their mind about what XRP or digital assets are as a whole. But what I want to say is that this is collectively a global effort. I think we've seen enough information from here on this channel and everywhere else that we've seen it, that this is an international effort and a cooperation to figure out how to launch everyone's digital dollar, maintain their sovereign nation rights and their currency, and not challenge or diminish any of those things for any nation around the world, and at the same time introduce a global stablecoin, which I believe is either XRP itself or a stable coin that's built off of it. Now, I think some of the things that are still coming up here, we just recently had a G7 finance ministers meeting on October 13th. Well, what's interesting about that, Brad? Well, I'll tell you really quickly before we get out of here, is that the head of the IMF, World Bank, and the Financial Stability Board joined the discussion, and they talk about going through this and dealing with the pandemic and everything that leads up to the IMF World Bank annual meeting. The finance ministers, central bank governors discuss domestic, international economic responses underway, strategies achieve a robust recovery throughout global economy, and then they talk about also debt service suspension and broader debt issues, and they also discussed digital payments issues. And we also have this coming up November 21st through to November 22nd. This is the G20 Virtual Summit. I can tell you that the bullet points of this is about the digital economy task force that the G20 has put together, and cross-border payments, as well as other issues dealing with the pandemic. These are the things to watch out for, ladies and gentlemen. This is getting really, really good. I tell you that. All right. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. That's going to do it for me today. Make sure you check out the links in the description box in the comment section. Really great stuff in there. I Trust Capital, the best crypto IRAs on the planet. They even have gold and silver, best money you can get over spot. I mean, forget about it. It's the bomb. Check out the Ledger Nanos. They got a deal on family packs. Check out the crypto domains with Unstoppable. Really great stuff in there for all of you. Just check it out. Make sure you see if there's something in there you may want or need. And I'll catch all of you on the next one.